we go. Okay. Call the regular City Commission meeting of September 8th, 2020 to order. May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Ooh. I'm looking for a flag. Where's the flag? Where's my flag? All right. I pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Wow, that was an auspicious beginning.
Yeah.
Amy, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Budnick?
Here.
Commissioner Perry?
Here.
Commissioner Scott?
Here.
Commissioner Wall?
Here.
Mayor Metzger?
Here. Okay, we're all here. So the first item on the agenda is public discussion, items not on the agenda. So if anybody has anything to bring forward, please come forward and give us your name and address. And
can you guys see me?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Lisa Mueller, and I'm at 37 Sylvan. And I would like to bring up the dog barking ordinance. And I was asking you all for clarification regarding the ordinance. I think I sent you a copy of it, so I didn't know if you had a chance to review it. But this is ordinance. It's section 10-44. It's regarding dog barking. And it reads as follows: it shall be unlawful for any reason for a person to own, possess, keep, or harbor any dog which can be found loud, frequent, or habitual barking, yelping, howling that causes serious annoyance. Anyways, the part that I would like clarification is regarding the loud and frequent or habitual barking. What exactly is the definition of frequent, and what's the definition also of habitual? Is that every week? Is that every day? The other ordinances for noise ordinances, those all do have a time element, like the construction ordinance is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and radios and musical instruments are from 11 p.m. To 7 a.m. And then also the shouting, whistling, and singing ordinance is also from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So that is not my dog, by the way. Just to clarify that. So anyways, I was just asking for clarification regarding the dog barking video, if maybe that ordinance can be a little bit more precise. I was going to say, I think some police resources have been wasted on frivolous calls by certain neighbors regarding, like, say, if the mail person comes or if the dog's barking for even short periods of time, and then police have to make calls and such. And so anyways, that would just probably be helpful for the police department as well.
And just let me add a little context to Lisa's comments is that I checked with Kevin Nowak about calls on barking dogs. And over the last 6 months, he was able to account for 6 calls. 4 of them were calls from the same location about Lisa's dog. And if anybody's ever met Lisa's dog, it's not what I would call a rabid barker or a problem. She's never had any issues from any other neighbors, either behind or on the other side. So it's a kind of a neighbor to neighbor issue, but because of the way the ordinance is drawn up, it's very difficult. Police have to respond. And I think we need to, my idea is to start to look at other dog barking ordinances that are out there to see if we need to change, if there are other examples that we might be able to use to make some changes. So, but I just wanted to throw that in before if Jim had some comments.
I don't have much on this one. Dogs are tough because, they're living creatures. Noise ordinances that deal with construction or things like that are measurable and, regulatable. You can tell a construction crew to go away and the problem's solved. Dogs, people own them. They live at the property 24/7. And so the ordinance by, I think, necessity as written is a little more discretionary in terms of the officer responding who has to decide if it's a real problem or not. But that said, I think that it's possible to look at other dog ordinances. The one we have was written decades ago, I'm sure. And I don't know if there's been advances in the state of the art in terms of dog barking ordinances, but I think our next step would be to have Greg Need take a look at that, see how we stack up with other communities. And Greg, I don't know if there's any case law that exists or anything like that we need to be looking at. But I think that would be our next step if the commission had interest in benchmarking our ordinance.
Yeah, sure, Jim. I'd be happy to do that at the commission's direction. You're right. You're absolutely right. Dog ordinances are tough. The language, when we try to draft municipal ordinances, we try to draft language that's been upheld by courts, whether in Michigan or nationwide. And the language that we have, admittedly, it's got a fair amount of discretion, but it is based on court cases for quite some time ago. It's tough to come up with a more precise objective standard. So that's why we have phrases like habitual, et cetera. But I'd be happy at the commission's direction to take a look and see if there's anything else out there and bring it back next month.
I'd be interested in seeing that as well.
Yeah, one thing I would appreciate clarification from the police. If they do get a call, how do they go about handling those calls? I mean, I've understood that they drive and then wait outside the house and listen. I'm not quite sure if when the call comes in on a barking dog, of which there are very few, obviously, as I said, 6 over the last 6 months, what are the steps that the police then have to take to respond to that call?
You want me to respond to that now, Mayor?
If you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, we get very few, but we do get them. Typically, the officer would drive to the location and stay in the area and listen, for a while to see if there's a dog barking. And how frequent is the barking? Is it like nonstop, habitual? How long does it go on? Many times the dogs that we get calls on, either they are barking, we go up and knock on the door, and if people are home, advise them that we've received a call. And if they could keep their dog in check a little bit better and not to bark so frequently. And if they aren't at home, we leave them a note in terms of a door hanger or a card with a phone number to call, and then we'd explain the situation to them. We don't drive around and listen for dogs barking and do that. We respond only to calls. So somebody a resident, obviously in the city, is annoyed by it by one reason or another, and then they call us and we respond. Because it's a police call, we have to respond. No matter how frequent or infrequent, we know who the habitual callers tend to be.
Mm-hmm.
But every time the police are called, we have to respond. So that's the point.
Okay.
Is here in this instance. Very rarely is a ticket written, although we have written tickets in the past. Sometimes just talking to the owner is good enough. Sometimes warnings are issued in the form of a ticket, but it's not an actual violation that they don't have to go to court on. It says clearly on there that it's a warning. So it's to advise the people that, somebody's complaining about their animal barking habitually. Tickets have been written, but typically the caller has to be the complainant and then appear in court and explain to the judge. And the judge typically would try to barter some sort of agreement between the dog owner and the complainant about the noise. And that's typically what happens. Unless, Sergeant Reed, do you have anything to add that I missed?
I think we're good on these calls. We get out of the car, we see what we can hear from the street, and we take action after that.
Do the police ever interact with the caller themselves?
Only if they choose. Sometimes the people want to remain anonymous. They don't want the dog owner, to know who was calling. So they'd ask that we don't go. We do ask, is that something that the caller wishes to actually speak to the police about? I see Robert Cook on here. I'm sure they do that the same way in Oak Park. And if it's wrong, then you can explain, but that's typically what we do. Many people want to remain anonymous so as to avoid a neighbor conflict. I don't think in this instance that we're talking about that's the case here.
Yeah, well, I would just appreciate if you just take into consideration, because all the other ordinances do have time periods except for this one. So like I said, for music, if I want to play a musical instrument continuously all day, I could do that except from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And obviously my dog does not bark the entire day during that time. So.
Well, then I think I would just ask Greg if we could look at any other possibilities. I don't know that there's anything we can change, but I think it would be helpful just to see what else is out there.
Sure, I'll take a look I'll see what I can find and report back next month.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Are there any other issues?
Mayor, we have one more participant who's raised her hand.
Okay.
Susie Sherman Hall.
Uh-huh.
I was just going to comment on this, that I didn't realize we had an ordinance. It makes sense that we do. And I have called in the past about my neighbor that's no longer there, who had some mental health issues and would leave her dog out and forget. But it was always like late night, and it was an outside thing. And I was concerned about the dog. I was really concerned about the dog's welfare. So in looking at the ordinances, it does seem like, with the noise and everything else, if someone's dog is in their house and the mail person comes or whatever, other dogs walk by. I mean, that happens in my house. So I feel good that I can talk to most of my neighbors about it. When it was a late night thing, I've called because it was so late at night. And I thought that was something where maybe there was something wrong with that individual because she had some challenges. So it does sound like that might be something that would be helpful, but I get that it's vague so that you've got, the intent is to give some room, but if somebody's abusing it and taking advantage of it because there's wiggle room, that isn't good either. So.
Good points. Okay. Any other hands that you see, Jim?
There are no further hands raised.
No further hands. All right. Well, then we'll move on to governmental reports. And we have the chief, I know.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we start with Chief Nowak, and then I think Shawnee and Greg probably want to talk a little bit about some things going on recreation-wise, and then I have a short also recreation update. So, Kevin, let's turn it over to you. And you're muted, Kevin.
You're muted. Kevin.
There it goes. Sticky button here that wouldn't let me unmute. Chief Pichet from Ferndale Fire texted me earlier and say he had a prior commitment, so he wasn't not able to attend. He apologizes. He didn't want me to mention, I'm going to read from his text here, a couple things, or actually one thing that in August, Ferndale had 5 fires that were related to discarded smoking materials in their town. One house was completely destroyed and caught the house next to it on fire. All these happened in about a 3-week period, and I had asked him if these were all from like whether they're from bonfires or things like that. And he said, no, all from like cigarette smoking, discarded, not put out cigarette butts or whatever. So 5 fires in Ferndale related to smoking. So if you're a smoker, he wants everybody to be careful and make sure that your butts are extinguished or put outside or something. And that's all that he had. And again, he apologized for not being able to attend the meeting. I don't really have very much. We had in the last month only one larceny from vehicle, again in a car, like we preached, unlocked. A woman's purse was stolen from her car, and then we actually located it next door because the offender tried the next car and left the purse and actually dropped the wallet, we think, out of his pocket. So everything was found intact. So crime solved very easily. I love it when we can solve them that fast. We have fall is coming, leaves are starting to fall. So if you avoid parking in the street, we do have cars catch leaf piles on fire. So be wary of that. And we've had political signs being stolen off people's lawns. So if you're out and about or you have doorbell security or you see that, just give us a call. So we'd like to take action if we can, catching those people doing those things. And that's all really I have for today.
Okay, Shawnee? You're muted, Shawnee. Hang on.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. So we have good news. The Wellness Center opens officially back tomorrow at 8 a.m. Yay! I know, we're super happy. We have lots of people that are already signed up for time frames. So we are working Monday through Thursday, operating from 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., 8 to 4 on Friday, and then Saturday, 11 to 3. Anybody coming into the Wellness Center will have their temperature checked, will need to wear a face covering their entire length of their stay at the rec center, which includes the workout. I know we're going to have lots of questions about that, but that is what came down in the executive order. We will limit to 5 people in the Wellness Center at any given time, and you do have to be pre-registered. There's no walk-ins for the gym that's going to be available to people. So we're just really encouraging lots of people to register online. And if you don't have internet or you can't get connected, you've forgotten your password or anything for the online scheduler, just give us a call. We can book you in from our desk, and we're happy to do that too. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can call the rec center.
You know, I have one question for you. Is there
Sure.
a way to cancel your reservation online?
So you can't do it online because it would send you kind of through a refund process per se. But if you just email Greg or myself or call, then we can just do it manually, and then that opens up the free time.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you for asking that. Yes.
Okay.
Any other
Greg,
questions?
yeah, you're welcome. Greg, did I forget anything? I think I touched on all the points.
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Okay, good, thanks. And then I know Amanda, she's going to have the community liaison reports from Recreation as well.
Okay. Jim, did you want?
Yes. So one other recreation-related item that I'd like to update everyone on is, let me share my screen. We will be starting construction later this month on the new pavilion at Gainsborough Park. We've pretty much finished the pavilion at the pool, and so now we're moving over. It's always been the plan that we were going to do the Gainsborough Park pavilion after Labor Day, when the kids go back to school, in whatever form they're back in school right now for you, and the park slows down a little bit. So this is going to be going in the space next to the shelter, and you can see the kind of the overall vibe that is being created here. It's more of a mid-century look. So we're very excited about this, to getting this built. So there's going to be some construction and a little bit of disruption in the park over the coming couple of months, but by next year, the time next year rolls around, we'll have a great space for outdoor gatherings and entertainment. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on this before we move on. I'd be happy to entertain anything.
Any questions for Jim? Any comments about how much you like it?
I was just going to ask, what happened to that center thing that I can't tell from the picture? That depression, like, circle area where the tables have been. What will that stay, or does that get adjusted?
Yeah, no. From this perspective in this image, you're just kind of standing on the top step of that. Yep. So this is just completely additive. Nothing that's there is going away. Okay. Anything else?
It looks great.
Yep.
It's really handsome.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other governmental reports? Okay, good. We'll move on next to the consent agenda. And there are basically 3 items. And one I wanted to just say a little bit about. There's a proclamation recognizing September as National Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month. I'm going to spare you reading the proclamation, but I was looking up some numbers and I just thought it would be of some interest, and just to realize what the issue, how important this issue is. As of 2018, which is the most recent data I can get, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in Michigan. In 2018, 1,547 individuals committed suicide, which is up 22% from 2010, and it's the highest number since I went back to 2000 by year. It's the highest number of suicides in any year. Of those 1,547, 1,233 were men. And then if we look at it by age, suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for 5 to 14-year-olds. It's the 2nd leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds, the 2nd for 25 to 34-year-olds, and the 4th leading cause of death for 35 to 44-year-olds. So it is an increasingly important issue. And certainly we have no idea what the pandemic is going to cause. The numbers of increases spurred by the pandemic, job losses, rent issues, everything that's associated. So I think it's very important that we recognize Suicide Prevention Month and realize how big an issue it is in Michigan and throughout the country. So I will then, if there are no issues, I'll ask, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move the consent agenda be approved.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay. May we have a vote? What?
Commissioner Perry,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
What
Commissioner
happened?
Budnick.
Was he able to log in, back in?
He's here, but he might be frozen.
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Metzger.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Woodward Heights traffic calming. Jim, I'm just going to send it right to you.
Was that next? I think it's establishing public hearings.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh gosh, I just skipped right. I'm sorry. I was looking at something else. Okay,
I know it's hard to contain your excitement.
I know. I knew everybody wanted to move on to that. So, all right. The next item on the agenda, I'm looking at it on my phone. I had printer problems. Establishing public hearings on Tuesday, October 13th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. to solicit public comments on the following ordinance amendments to the Pleasant Ridge City Code. A is ordinance to amend Chapter 14, Building and Building Regulations, Article 1, in general by the addition of a new section, Section 14-2, portable toilets, Section 14-3, dumpster use regulations, and Section 14-4, construction materials regulations. Next item is the ordinance to amend Chapter 74, Utilities, Article 3, Sewers, Division 3, Use Section 74-197, Prohibited Discharges. And finally, ordinance to amend Chapter 74, Utilities, Article 2, Water, Division 4, Cross Connections, Section 74-114, Adoption of State Regulations, Section 74-115, Inspections, and Section 74-116, Testing. Okay. Jim, is there anything you want to say?
Just briefly, just a thumbnail sketch of what each of these ordinances is doing. None of them are particularly revolutionary, but the construction sites ordinance amendment, that will establish some regulations for the location of porta potties and dumpsters on active job sites. We've had a number of instances where contractors who are working on a site place those right by the sidewalk, put dumpsters in the front yard. It's unsightly, and we don't want to look at that for months on end. So this requires those to be located in a side or rear yard. If it's impossible, then we administratively can allow them to locate those in the front yard, but with conditions to minimize the impact of that. The sewer item is an issue we've also been dealing with lately. We've had a number of contractors who, through poor site management practices, are cleaning out their concrete slurry into the streets and into public sewers. This can block up the sewer inlets and then cause the sewers to drain even slower than they already do with the restricted covers. But most importantly, they can permanently block up those sewers where we have to go in and either clean them, hydrojet them out, or in some cases even replace them, all because they don't manage their site the right way. So this ordinance establishes some harsher penalties for that. Right now, we don't have great penalties, and this is an annoying thing. And then finally, the cross-connection ordinance. This really is housekeeping. We already have cross-connection regulations. This is to prevent there from being from mostly industrial sites, but residential sites with irrigation systems can also do this, where you can backfeed into the public water system. The cross-connection program seeks to limit that by having regular inspections of sites. And so we have retained HydroCorp. They're a company that does this on a contract basis. We don't have the capability to do it in-house. So HydroCorp also does this for Royal Oak and a number of nearby communities. And so they have identified a few amendments to the ordinance to bring us into current standards. The state's passed some different state laws and administrative rules over the years since we last updated our cross-connection ordinance. So this is housekeeping to keep us in line with the current state standards as those inspectors go out and inspect sites. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has on any of these. Right now, we're asking for you to establish the public hearing for October, when we'll actually consider these ordinances.
Are there any questions for Jim? Okay. Not hearing any, then I'm going to ask, is there a motion to approve the setup of public hearings in October?
Would you like the whole thing read, Amy, or since
Have to, you can put in the motion as they have been presented.
Your Honor, I move that we hold the public hearings as were presented.
Is there support?
Support.
I wish I could have done that.
Support.
You did the heavy lifting, so.
There is support. Any further discussion? Let's take a vote then.
Commissioner Perry,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Metzger.
Yes, motion carries. See you in October. The next item is Woodward Heights traffic calming. Jim.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen over again. Okay. So the Woodward Heights traffic calming test project evaluation, this is something that we've been looking at doing for a while. And the reason is a few years ago, we started looking at streets in the city where maybe the city would do some proactive traffic calming measures. The criteria that we used to determine which streets we would do that for were where we had volume that was higher than 2,500 vehicles per day, where we had an 85th percentile speed greater than 32 miles an hour, or we had specific areas where a safety hazard for pedestrians or bicyclists exist. So that narrows down where the city would proactively look at testing out some projects and trying to do things to make streets better, to Ridge and Woodward Heights primarily, and then Oakland Park and Oxford upon resident petition. And that's mostly just because Ridge and Woodward Heights carry high traffic volumes and have more specific impacts from those. So when looking at Woodward Heights, it's a bit of a challenging street because the houses, it's a normal residential street. You've got 50-foot lots, so there's quite a few houses. They're closer to the street. We have a lot of driveways. We have traffic. It's a half-mile road, and it's 30 feet wide. It's on-street parking as well. So all of those things conspire together to make it actually quite difficult to find traffic calming elements that make sense or that fit. Some of the things we could do on Ridge, for example, we can't do on Woodward Heights, like the center island at the pedestrian crossing by the school. You can't do that on Woodward Heights because that interferes with driveway access. So what we came up with was what we call a pinch point at the Woodward Alley. This was the area by the apartments and the funeral home. Some bump outs at Indiana and Bermuda to help shorten those crosswalks and try to make more visible pedestrians waiting to cross there. Stop sign removal at Bermuda, what we call Bermuda North. That's the Bermuda in Pleasant Ridge. And then we tested a speed hump at Bermuda South. And we call Bermuda over by the Heights Market, Bermuda South. And we'll talk about each one of those in more detail coming up. But just for a quick illustration of the test projects were obviously done with very quick temporary materials. So temporary, in fact, that during some big rainstorms, they started to float away. But the permanent implementation of these could look more like the illustrative pictures we have. So this is the entrance feature at the Woodward Alley. You can see where this would visually narrow down the street and introduce some additional green. It's 30 feet from curb to curb right now. With that parking lane, there's an opportunity here to introduce some green as you enter from the Woodward environment into the neighborhood environment and really reinforce that this is a green neighborhood environment. The bump out at Indiana and Bermuda could be on the south side of the street. It would be something that would take the parking lane and add a pedestrian refuge to move that pedestrian at the start of that pedestrian crossing closer to the other side of the street. Also heighten the visibility of someone who's waiting to cross there, who otherwise might be obscured by parked cars. And then it also shortens the distance. You're walking 30 feet across the road right now. This could reduce that crossing to 22 feet. That's close to a 25% reduction in the distance you have to travel. And then the speed hump, the number one requested traffic calming element that residents seem to suggest is a speed hump. And we've been resistant to do those for a number of reasons, but we figured while we were testing things out in Woodward Heights, let's do a speed hump test here and see if the theory and what's reported in the traffic engineering literature does hold up, and if we get the same results. And so we'll talk about that more in a moment. So those were the traffic calming tests we did, but let's stop for a minute and talk about the one that probably had the most energy surrounding it, and that would be the stop sign at Bermuda. One of the things that we did during these tests was to remove that stop sign. And there are some specific reasons for that. I sometimes hear that I hate stop signs, or that I'm accused of, being anti-stop sign. And that's not the case. But what is the case is that stop signs are a tool that has to be used in the right circumstances. They're not something that we should be just installing anywhere on a whim, or because there's a perception that they will do something. So I want to talk briefly about what stop signs are and when they should be used. And this is all out of the traffic engineering literature. We talked about this at the traffic calming town hall that we did back in January of 2019. So stop signs, they are intersection control. They are not speed control. And we'll talk about some of the research and science that supports this. But stop signs don't influence vehicle speed other than the immediate area around an intersection. And in fact, the research indicates that unwarranted stop signs can create higher speeds downstream. Sometimes drivers, when they're annoyed that they had to stop for what they perceive to be a stop sign that has no point, will speed up and go faster to try to make up for lost time or out of their frustration or whatever it is, but that's the psychology. So in order to put in a stop sign, they have to meet specific criteria by law before they should be installed. We should remove unwarranted stop signs, and that's in the Michigan Manual on Uniform Traffic Control, which was adopted by reference in the state law. And that traffic control manual says you should remove all stop signs that don't meet warrants. And the final consideration is unwarranted stop signs. They don't increase safety. And in some cases, not always, but in some cases, they can decrease safety. And we'll talk about why that is and the research that supports that in a minute. But what are the warrants to have a stop sign? Basically, when you have the intersection of a less important street with a busier street. And we see this all the time when you have a three-way intersection. For instance, when you're on Bermuda heading south to Woodward Heights, there's a stop sign at Bermuda. When you're on Oakland Park heading to Ridge, there's a stop sign on Oakland Park, but not at Ridge. When you have intersecting streets with equal volumes. And so this is mostly for a four-way intersection. When the two streets that are intersecting have similar volumes, there's a warrant to have a stop sign on both streets. But when you don't have equal volumes, the stop sign warrant is for the street that has the lower volume. And then other intersections, this is the catch-all for the traffic engineers to evaluate specific site conditions where a combination of high speed, restricted view, or a serious crash record indicates that there's a need for control by a stop. So when we look at these, there's been a number of studies, and this is a study that summarized 70 other studies that covered multi-way stops. Looked at their success and failure, how they performed, what the impacts of those stop signs were, both warranted and unwarranted stop signs. And the bottom line is that the research shows that the Uniform Traffic Control Device Manual is correct, that you should only use stop signs when they're warranted. So the research findings do support that multi-way stops do not control speeds. So when you have a speed problem on a street, the answer is not to put in a stop sign. It will control speeds for the 100 feet around the intersection, but beyond that, traffic speeds are unchanged or sometimes increase, but most of the time they're unchanged. Stop compliance is poor at unwarranted stop signs. This is often because drivers feel the sign has no purpose. There's no reason to stop because there's usually no vehicles on the minor street that's at that intersection. And we saw this because we had about 30 failure to stop citations issued per month at the Bermuda and Woodward Heights intersection, mostly from cars rolling the stop sign on Woodward Heights. And if you're a driver, the psychology here is pretty easy to understand. When you're driving and you come to an intersection, if you drive that way frequently and you come to an intersection where you never see a car at the intersecting street and you don't see pedestrians crossing frequently, you start to get annoyed with that stop sign, to think that it's pointless. And whether that's right or wrong. That is the psychology. And we know that at Bermuda, there's 90 cars per day that enter the Bermuda Woodward Heights intersection. And there's 2,700 cars per day that enter that intersection on Woodward Heights. So there's a huge imbalance in traffic count, the highest imbalance that exists anywhere in the city. Again, they don't reduce speeds on residential streets. 19 studies found that the signs increase speed more than 150 feet away from the intersection. 15 studies found that. Pedestrian safety decreased at unwarranted multi-way stops, 13 studies. And the reasoning here is that pedestrians expect vehicles to stop. And there's a perception that as a pedestrian, you can go because the cars are going to stop. But many drivers get in the habit of running the unwarranted stop sign. And so that can create bad situations. And then finally, they increase noise in the vicinity of an intersection. And that's from vehicles braking and then accelerating back up to speed from the stop sign. So that's the quick overview. Jim doesn't hate stop signs, but I do believe in the research, and I do believe in deploying stop signs where they are warranted. So when it came to the Woodward Heights Bermuda intersection, we did have a traffic engineer look at that. They also looked at the Ridge Oakland Park intersection, and then the Bermuda South intersection heading down into Ferndale to see if any of those had warrants for stop signs. Somewhat surprisingly, there was not a warrant for a stop sign on Ridge, even at Oakland Park, where traffic volumes are fairly equal at those streets, but because it's only a three-way intersection, didn't meet warrants. One other thing I want to talk about, in our traffic calming program for the city, there's a lot of things that we'll do by petition that we won't do proactively. One of those is allowing parking on both sides of the street. This would be the most effective way of calming traffic really on any street, particularly on Woodward Heights. There are some pros. It's free. It naturally implements all of the traffic calming measures that we can create with concrete and bollards and temporary curbs and all the other stuff that we do. And the pro is that it's easy to test and easy to reverse. The cons here is that nobody wants it. So, it's something that we throw out there as a real possibility for achieving traffic calming and even potentially reducing truck traffic and everything else. But every time we suggest this on a street, nobody wants to do it. But I'm still going to plug it here. It's an option. The con on Woodward Heights, and this is the real issue, is that we'd lose our bicycle infrastructure, that pseudo bike lane we have on the north side of the street. Parking on both sides of the street would not allow for that. So that is a real con. At this point, I guess let me, before we move on, does anyone on the commission have any questions? I don't want to open this up to public comment and lose the plot yet. We'll have plenty of time for that once we're done with the presentation of results. But is there anyone on the commission who wants to comment on anything or any questions you have?
So Jim, with the parking on both sides of the street, I mean, have we put that out? I know we discussed it in that January meeting a year ago. Was that something that the people on Woodward Heights were open to at all? Because I mean, it does the whole, it obviously brings the whole pinch point thing to the whole street, and is going to, slow traffic in a very meaningful way.
It does. We did suggest it at the January 2019 town hall meeting, and we had a specific section of that meeting that was devoted to talking about these Woodward Heights test projects to get some feedback from residents on what we wanted to test. And again, the sentiment from the people from Woodward Heights who were at that meeting was no, don't want to try it. I've also suggested it to some residents who have contacted me over the years about traffic issues on their street. And I've mentioned that, if people on the street would support this, we would try it out. And the result's always been, yeah, I talked to a couple neighbors and nobody wants to do it. So that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Jim, this is Brett.
Yes.
And so if the neighbors on Woodward Heights would like to try parking on both sides of the street, that's something they could petition for. Is that correct? And since it's practically a $0 cost project, it wouldn't be hard to test.
Correct.
Thank you.
we'll move on. So the process for the Woodward Heights test is we collected baseline data. We have a device that we can put out to collect volume and speed measurements. We put that out before we did anything. We had that in the past, and then we did it again this year just to get our baseline. We put the test projects in, and then we collected more test data at a number of locations along the street. We removed some of the projects where we had felt we had enough data on those, but some stayed in place. We collected further test data to see if there's any impact of some of the projects being gone. And now that we have all of that back, we also did a resident survey. And now it's time for the City Commission to decide what, if anything, to implement. This was the device. This is the device we use. It's small. It fits on a sign. It's very unobtrusive. And the nice thing about this is that drivers don't even know it's there. So this device doesn't, by its presence, it doesn't impact driver behavior. So we're getting a true measure of what the actual driving pattern is on the street. Oftentimes, if you put out one of those speed trailers that shows you what your speed is, that influences the results of a speed study because drivers see that and go slower than they otherwise normally would. So this is the device. If you ever see this hanging on a sign around town, now you'll know what it's for. So we took measurements of traffic counts and speeds at 3 locations throughout the test. Location 1 is where we've historically collected data on Woodward Heights. This location we chose because it's precisely halfway between the Bermuda and Indiana intersections. And so it was about the farthest distance away from any stop sign you could get on Woodward Heights in the main part of Pleasant Ridge, other than on the border over by Ferndale. But of course, you have the intersection of Bermuda South over there. And so this theoretically is a location where traffic speeds would be highest. Location 2, we have not tested that in the past because there was a stop sign controlled intersection, but we did collect a number of data through different time periods at that location to see how cars were traveling through that intersection to make sure that we didn't have any speed issues coming through the intersection. And then location 3 specifically was testing the impact of the speed hump that we put in just to the east of there. So the count dates, again, we had some data from 2015. In June, we did our pre-test baseline. And then at location 1, we collected data July, August, and September through different periods. At location 2, at the Bermuda intersection, we collected data there at the beginning of August, the middle of August, and the end of August. So we were very closely watching that intersection. So the bottom line up front, even with all of the test projects we put in, with the removal of the Bermuda stop sign, vehicle speed didn't change during the test. In fact, it was almost exactly the same. There's no impact from removing the stop sign. At Bermuda, the average speed varied between 23 and 23.5 miles an hour. So we did not see excessive speed through that intersection. So here's all of that data in a table form at the mid-block location 1. So highlighting this in orange to help guide our way through this table. In 2015, before we had done anything on the street, the key items here to look at are daily traffic was 2,850 cars. Average speed was 26.2, the 85th percentile speed. And that's a traffic engineering measure. Basically 85% of when you take all the cars, the 85th percentile speed is one that 85% of cars go slower than, was 30 miles an hour. This is a key thing because speed limits and street design by the engineers are often based on the 85th percentile speed, which is a whole nother discussion. But it's not surprising then that when you have a design speed on the street of 30 miles an hour, that the 85th percentile speed is 30 miles an hour. Speed limits are usually set 5 or 10 miles an hour below the design speed on a street. Again, we won't have that discussion now, but that is the case. So in 2015, you had 55% of cars that were speeders. You had 16.5% that went over 30 miles an hour, and then 3.8% of cars went over 35 miles an hour. So we'll call those the high achieving speeders. And we only had 18 trucks per day in 2015. So when you look at June 2020, the baseline data, just the edge stripes, which we put in last year, lowered the average and 85th percentile speed on the street by about a mile an hour. And anecdotally, a lot of people have reported that those edge stripes, people feel like those did calm traffic down significantly, or at least noticeably. And we had a 10% drop in speeding, and it reduced the number of people going over 30 and 35 miles an hour, as you can see. We did have 52 daily trucks, so that was a big increase from 2015 in June. The rest of the way during the test, the numbers are pretty consistent at every measurement point. So even when all of the implementations were brand new, to September, when they'd been around for a while and people were getting used to not having a stop sign at Bermuda and everything else, the average speed didn't change. It was still at that 25.2 to 25.4 range. The 85th percentile speed, 29 miles an hour, didn't change. The number of people speeding gradually decreases over the course of the test, although I don't know if that's a significant decrease. The number of people going over 30 miles and over 35 miles an hour maybe somewhat increased. The percent over 30 kind of ended up consistent with June of 2020. And you had about a 0.5% increase in people going over 35, but still well below May 2015. Daily trucks, that leveled out around 40. So I don't know if June 2020 was more trucks were using the street because traffic volumes were down because of the shutdown from the pandemic. But you do see that traffic volumes have gone back to where they were in 2015 as the tests went on. And I think that's a case more of as the economy opened up a little bit from the COVID shutdown. At Bermuda location 2, again, similar numbers. The daily vehicles at the end of July was 2,300, and then that increased back up to that 2,700 where we're at now. The average speed decreases as the test goes along slightly, but your 85th percentile speed is 27 miles an hour. Only a quarter of cars are speeding through that intersection, and even lower numbers are going over 30 or 35 than at the mid-block location. So certainly cars are traveling through this intersection faster than they used to when they had to stop, but we do not see a measured speed issue at that intersection. And then at speed hump location 3, here we tested two things. What is the speed 150 feet away from the speed hump? And then how did the speed 600 feet west of that speed hump change before and during the implementation of that? So before when the speed hump was put in 150 feet away from it, so that's basically 3 houses away, your average speed was 22.3 miles an hour. Your 85th percentile speed was 26 miles an hour. And then as you'd expect, your people going over 35 miles an hour was only at 0.5%. Once you got to 600 feet to the west, the numbers almost unchanged, slightly lower after you put the speed hump in, but by and large, the speed hump, like a stop sign at an intersection, has a very small area of influence that it actually slows cars down. And this is what we expected to find. And this is why if you're going to use speed humps as a speed measure on a street, you basically have to put them in every 600 feet. So in order for us to do this on Woodward Heights, we'd really have to put in 6 speed humps throughout the length of the street. And that was a takeaway that we learned there. To give you some comparison real quickly about how Woodward Heights compares, this is your average daily volume on the bottom axis, and then your average speed. So what you'll see is Woodward Heights has about 2,700 cars a day and an average speed of about 25 miles an hour. Ridge has the most cars and a slightly higher average speed. Oakland Park, similar number of cars to Woodward Heights, but quite a bit higher speeds. And then from the rest of the streets, Oxford has probably the biggest speed issue as people go down there, and we know that to be the case, but much lower volume. 85th percentile speed, again, that's a speed at or below which 85% of drivers go on a given street. So we had here the 85th percentile and average speed. So you can see it's a pretty strong correlation, pretty good fit line there. As 85th percentile speed goes up, average speed also increases. You see where Woodward Heights fits among Pleasant Ridge streets. Sylvan Ridge, West Cambridge, Oxford, Oakland Park all have higher speed issues than Woodward Heights. Of course, lower volumes on most of those streets other than Oakland Park. So really volume is more the issue on Woodward Heights than speed. And then truck traffic. We know this is another specific impact that Woodward Heights deals with. Again, this is about 40 trucks a day on Woodward Heights. Ridge sees about 24. Sylvan gets about 20. But Woodward Heights certainly carries the most in terms of trucks. So City Commission decisions. We have the pinch point. This is at the Woodward Alley. This one would probably, and this is what it was tested and what it could look like. One of the things we learned throughout the test was that people did not like the elements on the north side of the street. The edge striping, which has been successful, also creates a pseudo bike lane. It's only 3 feet wide between that stripe and the curb, so we can't identify it as an official bike lane. But it does create some protected space that bicyclists can and do use. And the pinch points on the north side of the street interrupt that bike lane. And we heard feedback that people did not like that. So if you're going to do anything permanent at the gateway entrance point here by the alley heading west on Woodward Heights, we'd probably only do it on the south side of the street. But we could visually narrow and create some green infrastructure space where we could take some storm water and put it in the ground around that sewer inlet and just create a transition from the Woodward environment into the neighborhood environment. Probably about $30,000 to implement that when all was said and done. Survey results, 55% of Woodward Heights residents said, yes, let's do it. 31% of non-Woodward Heights residents said yes. So I don't know. Not surprisingly, Woodward Heights residents would like to see investment on their street more than other residents. That's not a surprising finding. At Indiana, the bump out at the crosswalk could look something like this. Again, on the south side of the street, there'd be opportunity to do some green infrastructure there. Again, probably about the same cost, about $30,000 to implement. The survey results, similar, very similar. 57% of Woodward Heights residents said yes. 34% of other residents said yes. The Bermuda crosswalk, we've gone through why the stop sign is not warranted. I understand completely that this is an unpopular position. The survey results, 57% of Woodward Heights residents said keep the stop sign. 53% of non-Woodward Heights residents said keep the stop sign. On the other hand, it does not meet warrants. Traffic is operating from a data and measurement standpoint safely. Certainly there's a change in that intersection where cars are traveling through at speed now rather than stopping. So that does create some different perception and different feeling of traffic at that intersection. So I absolutely acknowledge that. But given the results of the study, given that residents who live at the intersection, a number of them have reported that there's been a reduction in noise as vehicles don't brake and accelerate. That was something we expected to find, and that has been confirmed by some of the residents living near the intersection. My recommendation would be that based on the results of this study, the traffic engineer's analysis, that stop sign should be removed, and that other elements of that crosswalk be made permanent to highlight pedestrian safety. And those could be things like these bright green pedestrian signs at the crosswalk, maintaining the ladder striping, the stop for pedestrian signs, which currently are there to narrow that intersection to make it uncomfortable for two drivers to pass through at one time. It's by design, causes drivers to pay attention and to slow down when oncoming traffic is present. So that is a feature, not a bug. And given those things, again, my recommendation is that we keep the stop sign removed. And again, understand that is an unpopular position. Safety at the intersection is probably equivalent either way. So if the commission decides to follow the results and impact from the majority of residents to return that stop sign there, absolutely we'll do it. And finally, the Bermuda speed hump. There was little measurable impact on speed or volume. One of the things we were really curious to see if truck traffic or truck volumes would decrease, because that would be really annoying for trucks. It didn't. Resident feedback, we polled the residents who lived within 200 feet of the speed hump, and 80% want it gone. It's noisy, it's loud. 20% want it to remain. So we would recommend that we remove that speed hump. And in fact, we have to remove that speed hump. It was just a temporary installation, and it's not going to last much longer. But whether we make that permanent with actual asphalt as a permanent installation in the future is the decision that the commission needs to make tonight. So those are, that's the run through on the results of the study and the decisions before the commission. And so I think at this point, we can open it up for any commission questions or comments. And then if this is acceptable to the mayor, then we can open it up to public comments and discussion. And again, during the public comment and discussion, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. You can find that if you're on an Apple, there's the menu up at the top right corner, and you see the raise hand in the menu that drops down. PC participants at the menu on the bottom of the screen, there's a raise hand on the right side of the screen. So if you click on the participants, which is circled, then you'll see raise hand. And so please take advantage of that. Do that at any time. If you're a resident who would like to speak on this, your hand will stay raised until I lower it. So I will go through and make sure that everyone's raised their hand has a chance to speak. And we ask that you do this because if everyone on a Zoom meeting starts to talk at once, it very quickly spirals out of control and becomes basically meaningless. So okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll bring it back. And Mr. Mayor, to you.
Yes. Open up, commissioners. Does any one of you have any comments to make?
So Jim, so what you found was that without the stop sign there is no change of the speed of the cars on the street?
Clearly, the speed increased in the area of influence of that stop sign at the intersection. But at location 1, the mid-block point speed was unchanged before.
I know. Okay, because I know we got a couple letters from residents who live right there in the intersection, and they had mentioned they liked it a lot without the stop sign because it does reduce like the amount of noise from brakes, like you were saying, and then also the engines revving to get started again and everything like that. And just sort of, it was just like a smoother in their day.
Yes. And one thing we hear on every street, I think a common comment we got from some residents was that cars were ripping through the intersection or, tearing through the intersection. And I understand that comment because certainly they're going faster than they were before, not basically illegal rates of speed. But, it's something we get from residents on every street in town is when you're on the side of the road and a car drives by at 26 miles an hour, it feels faster than 26 miles an hour. Right. And we've gotten this on a number of streets. I've put the radar counter out on many streets in town based on this complaint or comment from residents. And when the average speed comes back at 24 or 26 miles an hour, it doesn't necessarily line up with the perception of speed when you are on the sidewalk next to the street. And so, I think that's very certainly a case on Woodward Heights. There's more traffic on Woodward Heights than most streets. So it's, maybe there's more cars that are going 25 miles an hour, but feel like they're going faster. I absolutely acknowledge that to be the case. And so I think that's why it feels maybe that cars are increasing or going quickly through that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Anything, other commissioners? Brett.
Yes. Thanks, Jim, for all of the work that was done on the survey. It's very thorough, and I think it's helped us understand the condition on the road. From my view, it appears that Woodward Heights is actually a calm road. We're fortunate that most of the roads in Pleasant Ridge are relatively common, and Woodward Heights, although it does have issues, it's still a relatively calm road, and that's part of what makes this difficult to find things to improve when the road is already on average running around or below 25 miles per hour. With that said, I can see how the loss of a stop sign might feel like it's a safety issue, how it might feel as though it's a challenge, or it might actually present some more challenges, but the data doesn't seem to show that. So this is really the challenge of the decision tonight, is to weigh the improvement of noise and data that would suggest that there aren't a lot of changes with or without the sign against the perception that there might be some safety issues around the sign. My view is that I would rather leave the signs out for the same reason that we have ordinances for where you put your air conditioners and how tall garages can be. All the things that we do to enforce code, I think it makes sense to do that with the stop signs. We have some rules on the books that say that the stop sign isn't needed. And my personal view is that since it doesn't seem to be needed, it's probably okay to get rid of it, with the caveat that we replace that stop sign with good pedestrian signage. And I found just personally that the yellow signs, the thing in the middle of the road, all of that really does work to draw your attention to the intersection, to make people aware of who's crossing and when people are crossing. And I would be in favor of not putting the stop sign back, so long as we had other signage there that indicates that it is a pedestrian crossing, as we've done on Ridge Road.
And, you know, referring to that, like I agree with that the pedestrian signage, I think, really makes a big impact. I know when I've crossed it on foot, people seem to really notice that. Jim, is there, like, what type of signage would you, well, you did show that, would it be more the signage on the side of the road, or would it be both that and those little bollard things?
It would be both. We'd want to keep the stop for pedestrians signs that are currently out, and those are lined up with those two edge stripes. We'd want to keep those out there. Much like on Ridge, those serve a traffic calming purpose, and highlight and also educate drivers as to the expectations, that we have, and if there's a pedestrian stop for them. Technically, the state law is that you have to stop for a pedestrian that's already in the crosswalk. But those signs do oftentimes cause cars to stop for somebody who's standing on the side of the road. Again, acknowledge that as a pedestrian now, the onus does become on you to make sure that that car stops before you step out into the road. Yeah. And I will not ask any other resident in town to do something that I won't ask me or my kids to do. So I took my 11-year-old out there one day and I stood away from the intersection and I had her cross the street. That's just I wanted to see. And, she was able to do it. Most cars stopped, some didn't. But again, it's just, the discussion of, like most other unsignalized or uncontrolled intersections, you just have to make sure that that car's stopping before you step into the street. But no, we would make the signs in the street a permanent thing. And then we would also add the signs on the side of the road that would be there all year round.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one more back to the stop sign. I think my biggest issue has been the replacement. If we continue without the sign, just that the signage and the paint and everything is jarring enough and visible enough,
right,
that it will bring, that it will obviously bring the person's attention, so that they do have to at least focus on what's going on there, which will tend to slow people down. Anyway, so that's
where I was landing, is that if the signage is good, whether it's a stop sign, a red stop sign, or something even more bright like the yellow signs that draw people's attention to the intersection, we might actually even be better off, as I think we've seen on Ridge Road on the pedestrian crossing.
Yeah,
I think it's critical to raise. I think we just need to raise awareness and make sure people are seeing it and stopping. Honestly.
Yeah, the paint is obviously an issue with that, of keeping that sharp.
Yes, and we know the edge stripes are already fading, and we're not pleased about that. We're working with the contractor either this fall or probably next spring to get those redone, just to keep them fresh and highly visible.
That's cool. Thank you.
Anything else before we turn it to public comments?
Just a
Right.
quick one on the speed hump. I will be so glad to see that gone. I'm not a fan. As a bike rider, I found that it's I won't even say uncomfortable. When cars are moving on the road and you go over the hump, it actually doesn't feel good as a cyclist on the road. And it does seem noisier just from my observations of watching people go over the speed hump. So I for one would rather not see it there.
Anybody else? Okay, Jim, I think we're moving to public comment.
Okay,
So
great.
you can
And remember, any resident who would like to speak on this, please use the raise hand function through Zoom. Currently, we have 2 hands that are raised. So let me start. Oh, now we have 3. Okay. Let's start with Robert Cook.
Oh, unmute yourself, Robert. Sorry. Up there. Oh. He was unmuted. Now he's. There we go. Huh.
I think we're
Robert,
having trouble with your microphone.
Yeah, Robert, we're still not hearing you. So, Robert, let's put you on pause. Try to see if your audio is connected.
Yep.
And in the meantime, we'll go to someone else while you work on that, okay? And if you need to leave the meeting and come back, you can try that. Okay, let's go to Benito Uresti.
Hello, guys. Thank you for your time. I noticed the data said what it said. I had a question. Did we test the sign speed before the pinch was added? It seems like that was done after the fact, which would skew the data.
Which point are you referring to?
The stop sign removal. Were we able to test the speed of the stop sign removal, as in we removed the sign, tested the speed around it without the addition of the pinches on both sides?
No, we didn't, because we put those in with that when the stop sign was removed. We put those in. I don't think the goal is to eliminate those pinches. So the point was to test it when those existed.
Okay, well, my problem is then we're investing $30,000 in something that does a little bit, but we don't have any data on what the stop sign did by itself, like the stop sign removal. Did those things counteract each other? Would having the stop sign and the pinches double the effectiveness?
Oh, I think I understand what you're saying now. Likely not. There was already a stop sign at both locations, so cars were stopping at Indiana and at Bermuda. The pinch point at Indiana was not really a traffic calming measure. It was highlighting the crosswalk. It was supposed to be more of a crosswalk pedestrian comfort improvement and an aesthetic improvement.
Was that the south one?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
so cars were already coming to a stop at that intersection. So whether you have that pinch point there or not, it would really not impact the travel speed at the middle of the block.
Okay, we're theorizing because we didn't know. Is there any way we could test that out before we do the pinches? Like, can remove the partial barriers for now, put the stop sign in. I mean, leave the pinches now, put the stop sign in for a month, test and see if that really changes the speed.
The pinch points where?
The pinch points where they are currently, could we put the stop sign in temporarily and measure that data? Because we never have it. We've never collected data where we have both pinch points and the stop sign. We only have stop sign independently and pinch points without a stop sign.
Are you talking about the pinch point? Which specific ones? Because there's kind of 3 locations where the street was narrowed: Woodward Alley, Indiana, and Bermuda. So which
that
when you
is a
say
good-
pinch points,
That is
when you say pinch points, I want to know
that's a
specifically.
good point. I would keep all. Well, I'm a kind of a science geek. I would like to see each individual one, but I know that's far too much time. We can keep all 3 pinch points and return the stop sign just to get some data on if the stop sign changes anything at all. Of course, you wouldn't need the one in the middle on the south, but I do like the aesthetics of it.
So here's the issue with that. If you put the stop sign back at Bermuda, most cars are going to stop in some form or another there. So the data there becomes, you can't really compare. At location 1 in between Indiana and Bermuda, the pinch point has no real impact on travel speed in the middle of the block there, because the pinch point is where a stop sign is.
It's so far away. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'd like to finish off with saying I'm also not a great fan of the speed bump. I've spoken to my neighbors, and yes, the noise is irritating, for lack of a better word. And if the speeds don't really change that much with the stop sign, I would really like to keep it. That's just my personal view. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, next. And can I ask, because this is public comment, can you state your name and your address, please, for the record? Benito, can you please let us know what that is?
No problem. 72 Woodward Heights, Benito Uresti, just as it appears on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I see, Amy, your hand is raised. So was that what you wanted to say, or was there something else, Amy?
I have a comment that came in through email. I can wait till the end, or I can give it now.
Okay, let's do that at the end. Okay, let's see. Robert was first in line, so let's see if we've got our audio issues worked out. Robert?
Can you hear me, Jim?
Yes.
Hey, yep.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the time. If I could just introduce myself to the commissioners really quick, I'd like to offer my personal and professional opinion on the Woodward Heights traffic calming. I've been a police officer in the city of Oak Park for 20 years. I'm currently serving as a community resource officer, and my job is to deploy our radar trailers and deal with citizen complaints about speeding, which, as Chief Nowak knows, is the #1 complaint on residential streets in a neighborhood. And unfortunately, the best solution, which is to put a patrol car on every street 24/7, would require hiring 30 more officers. And as Chief knows, that's not possible. I do want to thank Chief Nowak and Sergeant Reed for their efforts on Woodward Heights, especially just in the last month or so. I've seen them almost every day at the corner of Indiana and Woodward Heights, monitoring that stop sign and doing enforcement there. And that makes a big difference on Woodward Heights and down there, so it's much appreciated. I think Commissioner Scott said it best when he said, it doesn't sound like there's a problem on Woodward Heights. Your statistical data shows that the average speed is just barely over the speed limit, and has been for quite some time. And I almost think that we're trying to come up with a solution to a problem that maybe doesn't exist. I will give my feedback on the things that you've done that I do like. I think the bump outs are really nice. I agree that it should be a south side bump out with the grass. I think it looks nice. I think it does provide a visual narrowing of the street. If it's only on the south side, that does slow traffic down. I noticed when you had those temporary bump outs out that traffic did slow down significantly. And I think that's an inexpensive way to take care of that, and it beautifies the street. The speed bump, I think universally is just being viewed as horrible. All of the problems that you mentioned that existed at the stop sign at North Bermuda and Woodward Heights, cars stopping, slowing down, speeding up. You have all of those problems at the speed hump, plus the extra noise of cars crashing over that speed hump. It's just terrible. Not to mention where the speed hump is placed. If you're turning off of Bermuda or you're turning onto Bermuda from eastbound Woodward Heights, you're turning while driving over that speed hump. And in the rain the other day, my car got all squirrely going over it in the wet. I just think it's a very unsafe position for it. And also it's placed at the beginning or the end of the neighborhood, depending on which way you're going. So you're slowing down traffic either when they're almost out of the neighborhood or they're just entering the neighborhood. And then there's no more speed hump or speed control the rest of the way. So the placement there doesn't seem to make much sense. What else was I going to say? Oh, and the last thing I would say is I would very strongly urge you not to even consider parking on both sides of the road. 5 years ago, I actually did a study and presented a paper to the city manager of Oak Park to actually get rid of parking on both sides of the street in Oak Park for a couple of reasons. The road is, Woodward Heights right now is barely wide enough for two cars to go side by side with parking on one side of the street. You actually have to drive in the pseudo bike lane, as you described it, for two cars to pass. If you have cars parked on both sides of the street, there's not room for two cars. And it's going to be what we have in Oak Park on many of our streets where there's parking on both sides. It's a game of chicken. When you have opposing traffic, somebody has to pull off into the end of someone's driveway so the other car can get through. And with the traffic volumes on Woodward Heights, that's just inconceivable, the amount of cars that are going to be pulling over, honking, the chicken that's going to take place. People are going to have to back up. It just sounds like a nightmare. Plus, you're going to have, like you said, you're going to lose your bike lane, which, especially since COVID, I've noticed just a ton of people in the bike lane. They're really using it. I guess that's all I have to say. Oh, sorry, Jim, may I say one more thing?
Thank you. Sure. Go ahead.
Robert, I was just curious, had you commented about the stop sign?
That's what I was going to say. Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to comment on that. That's one thing I did forget. I'm a big fan of a removing of the stop sign. We've actually removed some stop signs in Oak Park. And what we've found, and I agree with Jim, I'm sure the chief knows this as well, the biggest problem on Woodward Heights is people running those stop signs. Well, you've reduced that problem by half by getting rid of that stop sign, but with no consequences to speed. And everything that the study showed and what Jim said is true. People speed between nonsense stop signs. If they can just lock it down at a constant speed, that's what they'll do. And that's why I'm not a fan of the speed hump, because you've got people slowing down for it and then accelerating away from it. They can't just maintain a constant speed. So I think removing the stop sign there was key. I think traffic just going by your house is less obtrusive than stop-start traffic in front of your house. So I'm a big fan of removing the stop sign. But I do think some pedestrian controls at the stop sign with a bump out, so it's a shorter distance across. I think a bump out where the speed hump is right now would be beneficial. It's a shorter distance across the intersection for pedestrians. And just that slight narrowing of the road, but still allowing two cars to pass, does slow down the traffic quite a bit.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could add a comment.
Sure.
Just the thought about speeding. I mean, our data show that maybe about 1% of people that drive on Woodward Heights speed, like excessively around 35, and that may be what some people are seeing. There's no way to get that to zero. So 25 to 30 cars a day are probably driving excessive speeds, but that's practically any road in town. So it is something that people are seeing on Woodward Heights, but it's probably typical for what we're seeing on every road right now, just a small percentage of people that do speed. And the extra patrol there at Indiana might help find some of those speeders.
Commissioner Scott, you are correct about that. The percent over 35 miles an hour is something we track on every speed study we do for every street. And it ranges from 1.5 to 5% on all of our residential streets. So Woodward Heights fits right in the average category for that. And it's unfortunate, but there's a certain percentage of people who do unfortunate things. Let's see, next up, I believe the next person who had their hand raised was Arbor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and please name and address. And again, Robert, I'm sorry, Richard, but Robert, can you, for the record, your address, please?
think Robert's down around the about the 68 or 70 mark on Woodward Heights.
Okay, we'll look it
And,
up. Thank you.
Yeah, but for myself, I'm I'm Richard Burr. I'm at 48 Woodward Heights, which is about 3 houses from the intersection of Bermuda. I'm in favor of the bump outs. I'm in favor of the edging. I am a very big proponent of keeping the stop signs. And while I understand that we have had a blizzard of data, there's an old saying that says sometimes there's a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. What we essentially saw was that back in 2015, before the pandemic, speeding was a little worse. And then we saw a subset of data starting from June of this year during the pandemic, during the summer, when traffic is down, showing that traffic was quote unquote calmer. What I can say is that I frequently use the intersections on Woodward Heights at Indiana and Bermuda, and have been close to being hit about 3 times at the Bermuda intersection where the stop signs were removed. I mean, you can argue that part of it is we can have better signage. Part of the argument that's come up is that we can train drivers who desperately want to go and get to Woodward Heights as fast as they can. We can train them to be more considerate at an intersection where there is no definable stop sign. What I'm finding is that, yes, if you're walking around there at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's not bad. At other heavier times, you have people blowing through that intersection. They could care less whether you're on the edge of the intersection or not. We've had people videotaping having incidences like that. The other thing I wanted to note was that, let's see, I just think part of having the stop sign at that intersection is when you are coming west on Woodward Heights, that is the first intersection where a stop sign says to you, this is a residential community. Yes, you can look at the foliage. Yes, you can look at everything else. But the more wide open nature of the street says to you, this is a place where you can go faster. And if you're people who are coming from 9 Mile, where they've done traffic calming and they essentially got rid of 1 lane of traffic on 9 Mile, everybody knows that Woodward Heights is now the new faster cut through an industrial part of town in Ferndale into a more residential part of Woodward Heights, which is residential. And I would argue that having a stop sign there, even though it's allegedly unwarranted for speed reasons only, I would argue that it teaches people to watch for pedestrians. It teaches people that they are in a residential neighborhood and that they should pay attention. The other thing I have anecdotally noticed, and I'm not sure that anybody can back this up with data, is that you are teaching people that if they don't have to stop at Bermuda, why should they stop at Indiana? They've got a full head of steam. I don't care if they're going 25 or going 30. They've got a full head of steam, and if they want to get to Woodward and they see it within 25 yards, when they hit that Indiana sign, they're now going to say, the Indiana stop sign is unwarranted because why have I been traveling for roughly a mile from Hilton all the way through Ferndale into a new community, and the first stop sign I hit is 25 yards before Woodward, which is my ultimate destination. It's not like Woodward Heights is some great destination between Hilton and Woodward. We are a cut-through street. We are a destination to one of the biggest streets in Oakland County. And you are totally getting rid of that designation. And you are saying, hey, let's play a little social experiment here. Let's let people think that they can go running through, and that's all there is. I will close with just saying I would be interested in what the police chief or any of the other officers has to say about the utility of having a stop sign, not for speed management, but literally only for safety and teaching people that it's a heavily traveled road where we have a lot of people out walking and running because of the pandemic. They are going outside more, and you need to pay attention for them because this is an intersection where they're going to go across. And with that, I will stop. Oh, did you want to say something? Oh, well, wait. You're going to have to get on this. Come here. Can I put my wife on for a second? Here we go.
Yeah, thanks so much. I have to be on the headset.
Yeah, if you want to hear.
Well, I don't really care to hear. I've heard enough. I just want to say I'm a resident of Woodward Heights for 30 years. I'm honestly saying you're solving nothing, absolutely nothing by removing the stop signs. We have children on the street. You're presenting hazards. You're creating a great deal of stress. And you're making hazards for pedestrians and children. And I'm frustrated with city government for not being responsive. And you're having the audacity to use silly terms like traffic calming. You're fooling absolutely no one. Absolutely no one. And I'm just really upset. So I want to voice my opinion. I've sent you a letter. I'm not going to bother reading it. But I can tell you this, nobody believes you. Nobody believes your data. And nobody's going to believe anybody who votes against the stop sign. I'm certainly not. There's no reason, absolutely no reason to take a stop sign away from here. None. But I'm sure you've got something to say. You always do.
Okay. That's it from us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kurt, you're muted.
Yeah, Kurt, you're muted.
I'm sorry, here I am just babbling on. Chief, I wondered if you had any comment about what Richard had asked.
Okay. If I may, the city manager alluded to many facts and stuff earlier when he presented his video presentation with all the slides and things like that. I myself and have been in law enforcement going on 40 years in 3 different communities, and this argument is not new to any city anywhere. Sergeant Cook can allude to that. Sergeant Reed can allude to that. He's worked here his entire career. Couple things with stop signs. Unwarranted stop signs encourage disobedience. They also make drivers stop more frequently, which often results in them driving faster between the intersections. We've seen that between Indiana and Bermuda in this instance, and along with other streets and stuff in town and in every town. They do not lower roadway speeds, and the implementation of stop signs was for controlling an intersection when it met certain criteria. One of them, when road traffic exceeds 6,000 vehicles per day, which Woodward Heights does not. There have been, one of the telltale ones are traffic crashes. When there have been 3 or more correctable crashes within 12 months, or 5 or more correctable crashes within 2 years. Yes, Woodward Heights has share accidents, but not that numbers that support that. One of the other things is when the intersection has limited visibility. I think with the tree trimming and the length of Woodward Heights as you approach, that doesn't really apply there. As far as I'm concerned, and I've noticed it with myself, I'm stopping when we drive there. I'm stopping at that intersection because I'm used to a stop sign being there. But the visual effects of the temporary markers in the road as a pinch point draw my attention far more than the stop sign does. So I think what should be done, in agreement with pretty much everybody here, is with the painting, the signage. I mean, Sergeant Cook lives on that street. He drives it every day. He's called me before. In fact, we've argued a little bit about it, which I appreciate his kind words earlier, because he could have called me out on that before. But he knows himself that visualization now that's created there by this temporary fixes to, if it works, seems to be working. And if Sergeant Reed wants to add more, or Sergeant Cook, then I allude to them also. But that's my opinion.
Thank you, Chief. Is there anyone else? Jim, any hands?
Yes, we have some more hands.
Okay.
Let's see. Next up, I think in the queue was Susanna. And I don't know Susanna, it's just Susanna.
Yes, hi. My name is Susanna. I'm a new resident on Woodward Heights at 50 Woodward Heights. My husband and I, we've noticed a lot that it's really unsafe without this stop sign. I don't know about the evidence. I don't care about the politics, but I'm a walker, a jogger, runner, biker. I'm out there nonstop. I've almost gotten hit several times on my bike. We're expecting a child, and if we had known that this whole drama would have occurred, we probably might not have considered this because it's been very unpleasant. It doesn't seem like it's been a democratic process. It seems like this was just kind of sprung upon all of us. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It didn't seem like anything was wrong with this stop sign. The speeds really haven't changed. So if you want to do something, why not just add painting to the stop sign to make it extra safe? And you can do your curb bump outs and other things like that. But as we saw, more people on the street, 57% want this stop sign. So democratically, put the freaking stop sign back and do the other things that you need to do, because it's just really not safe, not fair to the residents. You are causing a lot of drama, and I don't appreciate the way that we've all been treated on the street. I don't feel like we were involved in the decision-making process. And as a young person, I think it's a huge turnoff, because young millennials who might want to move into this area love biking, love running, love being outside, and you're making it so that it doesn't feel very safe for us. So thank you for considering. I really hope you do consider what I'm saying, because I'm serious and I feel offended.
Thank you.
Okay, Mindy Schwartz.
Okay, I'll just add, I mean, a lot of the people who have opposed having no stop sign, or who support the stop signs, have said much of what I believe. But I'd like to point out, we talk about the number of trucks on a street. Please remember that on Woodward Heights, we actually have semi-trucks heading to Heights Market. I'm not quite sure why we consider that a local delivery when it's in the next city over and when there are options. But we have 40 trucks, many of them every day are semis. And now we are seeing a new game without the stop sign at this corner. People are getting used to it. And what they're getting used to is when they see a car coming the other direction, they hurry up. So they're the ones who don't have to slow down and wait for somebody to go through first. People are racing in a game of chicken at that corner. That we haven't had an accident yet, that nobody's been hurt yet, is surprising to me. I have seen bicycles run off the road. I have seen runners and people who run with their baby carriages. I have seen social distancing walking, where you have to be in the road when people are coming towards you. People getting almost hit or run off the road, or they have to jump onto the curb. I'm horrified at the idea of not having a stop sign there. I understand that if it was just for speed, it doesn't meet the warrants to just control speed, but it is not. It is a safety issue. The fact that you're saying that the speeds haven't changed much, to me, is actually fairly irrelevant, because the speed that has changed is the speed of cars going through crosswalks. And that's what's dangerous. Jim, I thank God that your child got across the street, however many times you sent her across the street. I think that's great. But when you live here every day and you cross the street every day, and children from the neighborhood are crossing the street every day to go to the Heights Market and get their candy or their ice cream, this becomes a bigger problem. And I will tell you, I saw 2 adults on a tandem bicycle get run into the curb by cars just going through, not at a great rate of speed, but down the middle of the road and almost hitting them. I hear more swearing from pedestrians and bicycle riders who are run off to the side than I can tell you. I see cars. Okay, if the speed hasn't gone up, the speed hasn't gone up, but it is not The data may show that this is a nice, calm street to live on. That is not the truth. The data is not the complete picture, and you cannot base your decision merely on the data. In addition to that, I have spoken to members of the police department, and Chief Nowak, I have great respect for you, and I am not challenging your opinion at all, but I've spoken to other members of the police department, and without any names, to a person, they want the stop sign back, which is interesting to me. Now, I get that if you take out a stop sign, you're going to have fewer people running a stop sign. But if we make murder legal, we're going to have fewer people guilty of committing a crime, of committing murder. You don't take out a stop sign so that you keep people from breaking the law. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to most of the people who live right here at this corner and see it every day. It also makes it, without the stop sign, it makes it twice as hard to get out of our driveways. And there are a lot of people with driveways right in this little area. If there's no big difference between having a stop sign or not having a stop sign, then we should have the stop sign, because the people most affected by it, the people who live here every day and walk here every day and ride their bicycles right here every day, want it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thanks, Mindy.
All right, let's see. We've got 2 more residents, and then Amy's email. Leslie Edwards. I see you speaking, Leslie, but we can't hear you.
Is it Mercy's mom?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm Leslie Edwards, and I live at 82 Woodward Heights, the favorite corner to not live at. And the reason I say that is I've been here 26 years, and I've seen a lot at this corner. I find it really hard to believe that the traffic only goes through this intersection at 27 miles an hour. I swear it's 45 miles an hour. I've had cars turn off of Woodward Heights onto Bermuda and hit my fence. Thank God I had a fence, or they would have hit my house. There used to be a street light at the corner. Then all of a sudden the street light didn't work anymore. It started flashing, and Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale got into an argument about who was going to fix it, and nobody wanted to fix it, so they took it out. I think that was the worst thing that happened to our street. And at that time, we had kids taking the bus and walking for the bus and coming around the corner. It's horrible in the winter. So I appreciate what a lot of people have said. I don't really see what's happening down with the stop signs. I'm not a fan of removing the stop signs because people cruise. You're not having a stop sign from all the way from Indiana. They're flooring it all the way through my intersection into Ferndale. But the worst part is the people coming into the city from the west. Like, I don't know if it was Richard, is it Richard Burr? Anyway, whatever he said about how they're coming all the way from Hilton, flying into our city. Yes, I hate the speed bump. Move the speed hump. It's horrible. It's so noisy. You can't listen. I can't open my windows and listen to a movie because I can't hear it. So I'm happy that's going away, that 80% want that away. I'm just tired of the traffic and the not safety at this intersection. And we've always had a problem because I'm the last house in the city, and so there's always been some issues down at this end of the street. And I understand the issues with the two cities, but it would be really great if you could work with Ferndale to somehow, for example, we're not supposed to have trucks in the city. And what Mindy said about the trucks, the number of trucks since COVID coming on the street has increased substantially. And the number of landscapers coming through. They're not landscaping on Woodward Heights. They're just flying through to Woodward or to go wherever they're going. It's amazing, the increased amount of traffic. So there is a no truck sign, but it's after you come into the city. So maybe that sign could be moved into Ferndale where the telephone pole, where the pole is over there that car hit last year. Like somewhere before you get into the city, maybe we could have a speed limit sign put before you come into the city that says, slow down, residential area, speed limit 25, something like that. And that would help us all on this street. I agree with Susanna's frustration. It's very frustrating to have the amount of traffic and the speed of the traffic on this street. And that's from somebody who's lived here a really long time. So thanks for listening. Oh, one other thing. Jim, you said you keep calling it a pseudo bike lane. Especially in the time of COVID, why don't we make it a real bike lane like Ferndale has? Like that would help. I mean, it's wider. It's got the green strips. It's got the white little poles. I mean, that would be cool to have a real bike lane in our city, at least on the east side.
Yeah, sure. I'll address that. I'll address two things, actually. There are 4 no truck signs in Ferndale when you're heading west towards Woodward. So adding a no truck sign at the city entrance, we could certainly do that. But if you look, next time you're driving west on Woodward Heights, starting at Gainsborough South in Ferndale, there are, I believe, 4, maybe it's 3, but if you look, there's no truck signs on Woodward Heights in Ferndale. Signs,
maybe they need to be that. Maybe they need to be that green color.
Yeah, I don't know that it matters. I know the trucks are an issue, and I know the police are looking at it daily.
Yeah, I saw
in terms of the bike lane, it's a geometry issue. In Ferndale, they had 36 feet of street. In Pleasant Ridge, we have 30 feet of street. And we have a parking lane that's 8 feet wide. So that leaves us with 22 feet of travel lane. A bike lane has to be a minimum of 5 feet to be striped as a bike lane. So if we put in a true bike lane, it would be marked only as a westbound bike lane. You couldn't, then that's basically the situation we have now. But then you would only have 17 feet of road. And that's not wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other. In Ferndale, they could do 5-foot bike lanes, and then they have a 2.5 foot wide, I believe it's 2.5 foot wide, maybe 3 foot wide buffer zone, and then 2 11-foot travel lanes. So if Woodward Heights, the geometry of the street only being 30 feet wide or being 30 feet wide instead of 27 feet wide, like a normal residential street, poses some real challenges. So I call it a pseudo bike lane because it has to be 5 feet to be an official bike lane. We can't call it or stripe it as a bike lane because that doesn't meet the minimum design guidance. And then we could be in trouble for basically for doing that. So it's an unmarked pseudo bike lane that you may use if you're riding your bike, but we don't sanction that as an official thing. So I would have loved to have had the regular ones, but we just don't have.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense.
We want to do everything we can to promote biking and all those non-motorized transportation options in the city. Sometimes you have constraints.
Is there something, just really quick, and it's something to think about for the future, is there something that can be done to improve this intersection, working with Ferndale somehow to make it a safer intersection so that people aren't coming up? I have the yard that all the trucks drive on. I have the yard that all the cars in the winter take the turn too fast and end up in my yard. So it's just something to think about for future. Maybe there's something we can do working with Ferndale to do something, not a speed hump. Thank you.
That much is clear. The short answer is I don't know, but we'll keep it in mind if there's anything we can do. We have 2 more hands raised. So one of them is Amy. We'll get to that last. Robert Cook has your hand up again. Robert, would you like to add something else?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Just real quick. So I used to live in a four-way intersection like 30 years ago, a four-way stop intersection. The thing that I hated the most was the stop start of the cars sitting at the stop sign with their loud music on or whatever. That instead of a car just going by, it was a car that was sitting there for a while. And I didn't want to speak for my neighbors down the street with regard to the stop sign. I was just putting my own personal opinion on it. If I lived near a stop sign like that, what I would like. And then also citing the empirical data that you have that shows that a stop sign doesn't slow people down. But I heard what the millennial, I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name, and then Mindy said, and quite frankly, I agree with them. If the people around that intersection unanimously want the stop sign, putting the stop sign there certainly doesn't hurt anything, and I'm not opposed to that. My philosophical opinion of knowing what I know about stop signs tells me otherwise, but I would never want to speak. Just like I'm speaking on this speed hump that's outside my house and I hate it, I can't stand it, but the people down the street might think it has some value. I can obviously speak differently. So I agree with them if they want the stop sign there and it doesn't hurt anything. But what I think is more important, because what I hear them saying is they're not concerned necessarily about cars speeding or that there's a speeding problem, but it's about crosswalk safety, which takes me back to your first slides and the things that you talked about at the beginning, which is the bump outs on the south side of the street. And that also addresses the issue that my neighbor across the street was just talking about, the entrance to our neighborhood from Ferndale heading westbound. I think if you put a bump out at that crosswalk, a bump out at the crosswalk at the other Bermuda, and then even a bump walk down by the regeneration store on the south side of the street, I think it looks beautiful. It creates a nice green space, almost like a gated entrance type thing. You funnel cars down to where they can pass side by side, but they don't have to wait for each other. And like my neighbor across the street said, it presents, and also the gentleman with the headphones, he said, it's your first indication coming from Ferndale heading westbound that you are entering a residential neighborhood. The street narrows down. There's a bump out with a crosswalk that's clearly marked with the signs. And I think that's a good first indication right there, that doesn't provide added noise, cars stopping. It's definitely a slowdown point, but it's going to look really nice too, coming into the neighborhood. So I really think those south side bump outs, 3 of them, and then, if the residents want putting the stop sign back there, that doesn't cost anything. I think those are very good things. You keep your little bit of a bike lane, you pinch traffic down, and you put extra attention on the crosswalks. Thank you.
Thank you. And
this is Brett. May I add a comment?
Sure.
The other piece, and I probably not said it well enough, is that I think when I look around the communities around us, I look at Royal Oak and Ferndale, they're putting pedestrian crossings in, and that is becoming the behavior that people are getting used to. We've put them in on Ridge Road, and our neighbors and people that are not from Pleasant Ridge have gotten used to the pedestrian crossings on Ridge Road, and that is becoming the mode that people cross streets. People stop at a pedestrian crossing, and they're getting used to that mode around us, Ferndale, Royal Oak, Ridge Road. And we know that the traffic on Woodward Heights is high. And my personal view is the pedestrian crossing markings made well are as effective, probably even more visible than just a stop sign. It might actually turn out that because everyone around us is moving to a pedestrian crossing method to introduce these crosswalks to drivers, that it's not a bad way to go. Of course, if everyone thinks that it's, the stop sign is what we've always done and that's the way to do it, we could always continue to do what we've done. But there are other ways to get the same job done. Thank you.
Yes, and so we have Mindy has raised her hand again. I just want to address a couple things while they're fresh in my mind before I lose them. I think the challenge for the commission here is that the input we've received about the stop sign at Bermuda is not unanimous. There's 2 very clear trained or schools of thought on this, and we've certainly heard the residents. I'm a little frustrated by the claim that this is not democratic in the process. This is the democratic process right now. What was done before this was the data gathering, and this is democracy in action right now. So I'm glad you showed up to make your comments heard, but I would also ask that you maybe give us a little more credit for the openness that the city commission and the seriousness with which they take this decision. It's a little offensive. But it's not unanimous. We did hear directly from some residents who aren't at the meeting tonight who have sent emails who very much like stop signs being gone at Bermuda for the noise reasons. And they don't share the same safety concerns. They're more comfortable with the operation of that intersection. And like most things, people tend to show up at these meetings when they're unhappy with something, not when they're happy with something. But we have gotten that input. And so it is a challenging decision for the city commission, because like I said, I know that the supposition of removing the stop sign permanently at this intersection is unpopular in terms of more people want the stop sign to remain. And on the other hand, you've got, we'll call it the science, which, says something different. So it is a difficult decision for the city commission to make. And I've said repeatedly, as staff, I'm certainly not dying on any hill for this. It's a stop sign. I have to present the kind of the professional results of the traffic engineering studies and the data, but it's entirely up to the city commission whether this stop sign stays or not. So there's a couple things that I wanted to add in. So we've got 3 hands now. So let's go back to Mindy Schwartz.
Thanks, Jim. First of all, I think part of the frustration is, candidly, there was no notice. We received notice the day that this test began. It set a bad tone to begin with. I never received notice, and I'm not the only resident who never received notice. I'm sure some of the people have no problem. Some people have no problem with the stop sign being gone. But the most of the people who live in the direct vicinity of this stop sign want it here. And I know you received some other emails that said they wanted the stop sign back. You didn't just receive emails from people saying they didn't want it. That I know for a fact. So, that's both sides. In addition to that, I have no problem with the bump outs. If you want to do those, that doesn't concern me. The stop sign is a safety issue for people getting across the street. It is not, even accepting all of your data regarding speed, it's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant because the issue is the safety issue on the street and getting across the street for everybody except cars. And I think you're going to see more accidents coming up, because I know other people right at this corner who are here more often have seen cars that are racing each other to get through that tighter space. Right now, a lot of people, and Brett, I appreciate your comment that other cities are trying crosswalks, but there are a whole lot of crosswalks that don't work. I've seen them on Washington and on Main Street where they're, forget pretending that that's a pedestrian crosswalk. In Pleasant Ridge across Woodward, right where you break off to Main Street, there's a pedestrian crossing. I dare a pedestrian to step in when a car is coming and expect that car to stop. They're not going to. There are many pedestrian crossings that just don't work. Why don't we try a pedestrian crossing with a stop sign? I don't understand the problem with having a stop sign. I really don't. Jim, you told me it's because it's not necessary. You told me that several times, but in Pleasant Ridge, we do sometimes more than is necessary because we are Pleasant Ridge. We have a culture of taking better care of our citizens than just what is absolutely necessary. And regarding the stop sign not meeting the warrants, that is not the law. They are guidelines. And the only thing the guideline says is that a stop sign should not be put in if the only reason is to control speed. And you've heard a lot of people tell you tonight that that's not the only reason we want it back. Thank you.
Okay, and I will point out that, Mindy, you may not have received the letters, but there were at least 3 points of contact about this study during the town hall last summer. We initially were going to do this test last summer. The Woodward Heights construction in Ferndale put the kibosh, so there's a letter that went out last year updating the time frame. And then the letter this year.
Was coming, we were not told when until the day of the study.
And really? The letters were delayed this summer for other.
Well, we all knew the mail was slow, but they came out that we didn't receive notice Nobody received notice that it was going to happen until the day it happened. I learned of it when I drove down the street and it was there.
I wish the letters would have gotten there sooner. Susie Sherman Hall.
Hi, thanks. I just had a comment about because I don't remember, and I wasn't at this town hall that you just spoke about, Jim, but what precipitated this study? Were there complaints about the speeds or people going through the stop sign or noise? Because I'm hearing all, what you found in the studies and all that, but I'm just wondering what brought that up. And what just occurs to me is, when I'm on Maywood, when we closed off the end of Maywood at Gainsborough, as you guys know, and Kevin knows, and Sergeant Reed knows, we had a couple of situations with people speeding down the street, hitting the dead end, and a couple bad outcomes. Nobody seriously hurt, but some car damage and stuff. So, there is always change. Now it's very quiet and all that. And I'm just listening to the comments and the frustration and some of the unfortunate comments and some of the very thoughtful comments of the neighbors. And I've driven on it as well. It's, I totally understand their frustration, and I also appreciate all the work you've put into it. So I just wondered where the starting point was, because if I missed that, I apologize, but I didn't hear what came out of this. And did you have no? Okay. Yeah. Why was the study done, basically? Thanks.
So a couple of years ago, we had the traffic engineers look at a few intersections around town. We had them look at Oakland Park and Ridge. One of the, we have Ridge that it's different than Woodward Heights. Let me say that right up front, but it carries more traffic than Woodward Heights. And there's not a stop sign on Ridge north of 9 Mile. So, we had pedestrian crossings many pedestrian crossings on Ridge, and there's no stop signs. So we looked at Oakland Park because we thought if there was a location that would be suitable for a stop sign on Ridge, Oakland Park would be it, because Oakland Park has the most traffic of any of the streets that intersect with Ridge, and they found that it didn't meet the warrants. We also had them look at Bermuda and Woodward Heights because we knew that was a location in town where people roll and ignore the stop sign the most. So it was just based on known issues from anecdotally talking to the police about where signs and where things are problematic. So that's why we looked at the Woodward Heights Bermuda. Indiana's a different case. That's 1,000 cars a day. Bermuda has 90 cars entering that intersection. So I know people roll stop signs everywhere. Again, I'm not trying to minimize anything, but that's why the look was taken at these few intersections.
One thing I forgot to ask, knowing, I don't know with COVID how Halloween is going to be handled, but would there be an opportunity to have a stop sign or something put in for pedestrian safety? Because there's kids and people, that come into the neighborhood and they're crossing the street willy-nilly, and that would be a big concern, I think, for all of us to have something like that happen, an accident happen without the stop sign there. I don't know how it is on Halloween myself, but I know Mindy gets a lot of traffic at her house with her hot dogs and everything. And we get a lot of overflow from the other neighborhoods. So I just wondered if that had been considered.
I don't know that it has for any part of the city. Okay, no one else has their hand raised. No, Mindy has her hand raised. Go ahead, Mindy.
Sorry, if I could jump in 1 second. I actually had asked the city if we could put the stop signs back up for Dream Cruise. And Jim decided not to do that because, for whatever reason, he wanted to see the whole process. But I was very candidly, City Hall told me it was too much of a hassle to put them up and take them down. And yet for Dream Cruise, we closed off 3/4 of the streets in the city. So I'm not quite sure why it would be such a hassle to put them up and take them down. But the request actually was denied for Dream Cruise when we have a much more substantial problem on this street than normal. Thanks.
It wasn't because there's too much of a hassle. Didn't want to whipsaw in the middle of a test of taking a stop sign down and removing it. And then I had concerns about putting it back up and then taking it down again of there just being too much change. Let's make a decision, and then the decision we make will be the permanent decision. Go ahead, Amy, if you have things.
Okay, so I received an email from Jay Foreman, 60 Oakdale. He would like to know how we measured the number of trucks. Can the speed device tell the difference? And what about their speed display sign like there is on Ridge Road? Maybe the speed measurements say there is not an issue, but that could be something to consider.
Okay, the answer to that is yes. The radar device we have does distinguish between the size of vehicles. So that's where we get the truck measurements. And when we compare street to street, it's all based on that data, so it's consistent. The radar speed sign is something we could put in. That was something that helped on Ridge where we had a bigger speed issue. Our 85th percentile speed on Ridge before we started implementing measures was close to 34 miles an hour. Its speed is, as I think we haven't heard a lot of complaints about the speed on Woodward Heights. That's not what the data pointed to. So I don't know that that's it's something we could do, but Woodward Heights is fairly far down the list in terms of speed, streets on which speed is the concern. So that's the short answer there, not precluding anything, but that's not addressing the issue we have. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to the City Commission, and good luck, guys.
Thanks, Jim. That was really wonderful. Let me just ask the commissioners if you have any, one last shot before we start to go step by step through this process. Brett?
Yes, just a quick one, and to catch on a comment that Mr. Burr made. How narrow could the road be at the entrance of Pleasant Ridge, say at the Pleasant Ridge sign heading westbound, or excuse me, at the Pleasant Ridge side heading westbound on Woodward Heights? I think the answer is no more narrow than the small bike line we have, but maybe there's a different answer. And I asked this question to give the perception that you're heading into the neighborhood, but not a third of the way into the neighborhood before you really get into it.
So that is the challenge with the bike lanes. It's 22 feet wide from the edge of the parking lane to the north curb. If you put in a bump out on the north side of the street, it blocks the bike lane. And that was input we heard that people did not like. And I understand that. So then you can really only bump out the south side of the street. And part of the issue is that when Ferndale did the Woodward Heights project, they did bump out the south side of the street at South Bermuda by the Heights Market. But you don't notice it much. So that's part of the challenge.
Got it. So it would be a trade-off of losing access to the bike lane in order to give the feeling that you're entering a neighborhood, even more than what we have already from, I think you said it was 35 feet in Ferndale, or maybe 37 feet down to our 30 feet.
Yeah. And to really create that gateway entrance point, you have to bump both sides of the street. And so then you're blocking the bike lane.
Right.
Got it. Thank
Another
you.
challenge.
Can I just say something real quick, Jim, to answer Brett? Because that bump out's at my house, it's just a little, they just made a little like curve with a sign where they painted the crosswalk. So it's not the bump outs that you're talking about further down with the landscaping and everything, which would make it look that way. And there is room because there's 2 car lengths that there's not supposed to be people parking. So there's plenty of room for that kind of thing there to add to what Ferndale did.
Got it.
You probably know because you said you bike it. So you've seen
I do.
it.
Thank you very much, though.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments or questions?
So, this is Commissioner Perry. My concern is that it's like, if you put the stop signs back in, I mean, we still have all of those, we've still got so many of the problems of the reason that the study, did start was everybody was concerned about, the cars that run sort of that stop sign. And it is, it's sort of, what the study has shown is that it adds like this calmness to that intersection. And I understand the attachment, the fierce attachment that you guys have to the stop sign. Is it, I hear it clearly. My concern is it's not gonna do at all what you guys, it hasn't done this in the past. So my concern is it's not going to in the future to create this, this safe zone. I totally hear the passion and everything behind it. So and that's impacting me quite a bit, but I remember as this conversation started in a Facebook thread, I am concerned that this is not going to be the solution that we seek. So I don't know. I think it's been a great conversation. I really do appreciate everybody coming to the table and really bringing a lot of your ideas and your experiences with all this. And I really greatly appreciate everybody's input on this.
And can I ask you a question? Are you sort of thinking like, where do we go from here if people are still like, we've done the traffic calming and we say, okay, we've done the research. The research shows that it's the best thing to do is to take away the stop sign. And then we say, okay, let's put the stop sign back. And then people are still unhappy. Like, now what? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. Sort of. It's like that was sort of some of the best outcome from this, which, of the study, which where do we go with this?
I think it's hard. I'm finding it hard like you, because common sense tells me to follow research because and I understand what everybody's saying too, which makes it, you know what I'm saying? It makes it hard because emotionally I understand what everybody's saying. And, I think it is it's a tough call. Thanks.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of weird because I think a well-designed pedestrian crossing might be better than a stop sign. So I actually want to do something better than we have now and take that next step. So going back to the stop sign essentially just takes us to where we've always been. And I don't know that we have the opportunity for improvement if we just do what we've always been doing for a million years. So that's kind of why I'm more in favor of good pedestrian crossing signal, not a signal, but, signage and the maybe a bump out, whatever it takes to make that pedestrian crossing a really good pedestrian crossing. I completely agree with Mindy that there are good ones and bad ones all over southeastern Michigan. Having done a lot of bike riding the past 2 summers, I've encountered a number of both. But I think we have the opportunity to make the Woodward Heights intersections even better than what they are now, or what they were with stop signs. And that's kind of why I wanted to try the really good pedestrian signage in place of a stop sign. And then that also takes care of the noise issue we've heard about and some other things. Understanding that there are going to be, sadly, a few houses that are affected negatively by the overall good thing that happens to Woodward Heights, and that's probably true for any change that we come up with.
Let me play. I can see Mindy getting excited over in the corner. So let me play devil's advocate for the residents. Again, I was talking about nicely painted, good signage, and everything else, but we haven't tested that out. There's a problem in there. I don't agree necessarily that what we put in there matches good signage and a good crosswalk and everything else. So I can see that it's what we have there versus a stop sign probably isn't the best test in the world for people who are worried about safety more than speed. So I'm not sure to say, okay, we eliminate the stop sign, we're going to have this great crosswalk done, because we haven't really tested that either. So that adds one element to my questions, that I'm not, I know we still have to go through all the various components, but I keep going back. I have gone back and forth all night tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm back in the,
all have, yeah.
I'm back with keeping the stop sign, because I'm just not sure that we can prove to residents that that we've got this great idea and this result will be the end all and be all and answer the kinds of questions and the issues and the concerns that they have. Well,
right.
I hear you.
Oh.
I mean,
Anyway.
and I think this answers the question of the young lady. I think her name was Christina. I apologize, I forgot your name.
Susanna.
This is the process.
Democratic process.
This is the process. I mean,
This is a process.
No decision has been made. No sale is ever final.
Yeah, and if a decision, I suggest that if a decision can't be made, we just delay, because I think it's really important for the democratic process to make sure we test all the options like you've so carefully tested the ones that you are putting forth tonight.
And I'm not sure when you moved in, because this has been a conversation for about 22 months. There's been a lot that has been tested, a lot that has been done to address issues. That's how we got to the intersection that we have now between Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale, and the small lane on the north side for bikes and things. So there is a lot that has improved, but we certainly know that there's a lot of issues that have not been addressed to the satisfaction of everyone.
Right.
And let me ask Susanna, when you talk about delay, does that mean delay by putting the stop sign back, or
Yes,
delay
trying-
by leaving the stop sign out and seeing where we go?
Putting the stop sign back, and maybe you could add pedestrian paintings if you're interested in that too. I would be okay with that. That sounds great.
Okay, got it. All right. I think what I'd like to do is at least go away from the crosswalk for a moment, get back to the pinch point just east of the alley as a first point. We have several decisions to make. I think we'll get to it, but I think the hump is not a question at all. I think that's pretty universal.
Would you like some motions?
Yeah, I'm going to look for some motions. And so I'm going to start with, I'm looking for a motion on the entrance pinch point at the Woodward Alley. That's that nice little green space that we would add on the south side, just east of the alley, as that kind of entranceway into Pleasant Ridge from Woodward. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move the City Commission directs staff to begin the process of implementing the installation of a permanent entrance pinch point at the Woodward Alley, Woodward Heights Boulevard intersection.
Is there support?
Second.
Okay. Any other further discussion before we take a vote on that? Okay. Amy, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Perry?
Yes.
Commissioner Wall?
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Mayor Metzger?
Yes. Motion carries. So the city will look into moving forward on the bump out at the pinch point bump out at the Woodward Alley. Okay. Now we move to the bump out at the Indiana corner, at the corner of Indiana and Woodward Heights. Do I have a motion?
Sure. Mayor, let's see. Mayor, I move the City Commission direct staff to not implement permanent corner Indiana and Woodward Heights Boulevard intersection, and that intersection remain unchanged.
Thank you. I'm glad you made that motion. Is there support?
I'll second that. And then can we discuss that a little bit?
Yes,
sure.
So
Sure.
Brett, what's your thought on that? That's my discussion.
Yeah. So my sense is that that particular bump out is probably not as effective as some others. If we add the bump out closer to the entrance of Woodward, I think we're probably going to get the most effect.
Okay.
That was my thinking.
And my thinking about it is that I agree with Brett, and I also think we have a stop sign there. People have to stop.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. The crossing that street is not a problem. It's not like trying to get across Woodward. You know,
Right.
22 feet is not that far, and people will stay at the stop sign. Adding that additional bump out is just taking away potential parking, and I don't see any, and costing $30,000.
It's a big expense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd say, unless we had a water management issue or something that required the green space, it's probably not worth it for that reason either.
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Further discussion? All right, Amy, can we take a vote on that particular motion?
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Perry,
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Metzger.
Yes. Wow. Good. That
Wow.
motion carried. Okay. So one up, one down. Can I just for my own peace of mind, can I just jump to the Bermuda speed bump before I go back to the crosswalk?
Yes.
So can I have a motion on the Bermuda speed hump, please?
Mayor,
Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead. Go, Amanda.
I'd like to make a motion to remove the bump out. I don't have the full language in
Right.
front of me. My thing is dying.
Oh.
Do you
So
want me
you're
to, you want to read it?
Yes, please, Brad.
Mayor, I move the city commission direct staff not to install a permanent speed bump at the Bermuda South Woodward Heights Boulevard intersection, and the intersection remain the same.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay.
Let's just go right to a vote. Amy, can you?
Are you
Hold us,
muted,
please.
Amy?
Oh, no.
I'm
she's there.
unmuted. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Wall,
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Perry,
Yes.
Mayor Metzger.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, now we go back to the elephant in the room, the Bermuda stop sign removal and pedestrian crossing improvements implementation. Who wants to make a motion?
So, Mayor, I will do it. Mayor,
I'm
I
glad.
move the city commission direct the staff to install the stop sign at the Bermuda North Woodward Heights Boulevard intersection.
I second that.
Could you? Okay, you're going to install the stop sign. That's the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any
I
discussion?
have a quick comment. One is, I think I want to make sure everyone knows, Commissioner Budnick is not making many comments because he's having Zoom connection issues. So that's why he has been unfortunately muted a bit tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner Budnick. But
Raise your hand.
Thank you for that.
if you would hold up yeses and nos, you could put up a Y.
Time to help.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask any further discussion. Can we? So we have a motion to put the stop sign back at Woodward at the Bermuda North intersection. I would assume. Well, we'll talk about further improvements on crosswalks, but the motion is to install the stop sign.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. May we take a vote, please?
Commissioner Perry,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Budnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Metzger.
Yes. Wow. I didn't think we'd get there. All right. Well, good discussion. So we are going to put the stop sign back and see where we go from here. Revisit it next
Not
week.
one, but two.
But two. That's right. Two signs.
Oh, just one. Just kidding. No, we take and we do take it very seriously. It's very we're laughing because this is a very stressful.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we do take this very seriously, and we have all been angsting over it for weeks. So just know that it is. While we may be laughing, it's just like some stress relief.
Well, and I think it's a testament to the city commission.
I think we're allowed a sense of humor. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's a testament to the city commission listening to residents. And I think a lot of great points were made. I do think, there is the science, and when people say they don't want to believe the science, I'm afraid I've heard too much of that recently. So that's not, I believe the science. I just think that there is the perception and the safety issues that the residents have brought up, knowing full well that several residents who live right at that intersection would love to see the sign gone. Knowing that, and I think that all residents need to be aware of that, but we have taken, I'm really quite amazed that we've come to a 5-0 decision to put the stop sign back.
Me too.
I would not have guessed that when the meeting began or even in the middle of the discussion. So,
and Kurt, if I may,
yes.
What tipped it for me is exactly what you said. I think there's some work to do to describe what the best pedestrian crossing looks like. And maybe that wasn't part of the study. So that sort of flipped it for me, in that I can imagine what that looks like in my own head, because I've seen really good pedestrian crossings all over the country. But maybe we didn't demonstrate it this time through. And because I think we can do better than a stop sign, and we'll look at it.
But, and I've also seen pedestrian crossings with all this cement thrown in the middle of everything. And
that's horrible.
I know. And I find Woodward Heights and Ferndale just scary. But anyway, I'm glad we've come to this. And so now we can move on to the city manager's report.
Yay.
Jim?
Is he here?
Yes, he's there.
Is he here?
So I don't know that I have anything on board. I'll just, now that we have direction, I guess we have some time frames for these improvements. No one should expect that the entrance gateway green bump out at the alley will happen quickly. That's a project that takes planning and engineering. So that'll be something that happens down the road, probably in conjunction with another infrastructure project we're doing in the area. So we'll work on it. I don't have a time frame. It'll probably be a while, potentially years before that gets in. But because now that we have to move curbs and everything, it's a bit of a lift. The speed hump will be gone tomorrow. And then lest anyone doubt the fact that, we conducted this study in good faith, the signs for the stop signs are still there at Bermuda. So we'll have those stop signs up tomorrow morning as well.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Jim. Okay. Finally, we'll go to any other business, any other announcements, anything that anybody has for the good of the group.
Yeah, you know what, Kurt, I do. I have
Yes.
something.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry,
Now I can't.
Say that no. Are you kidding? Okay, I have to move over here. Can you hear me now, or are you messing with me?
No, now I can hear you again.
Can't take it. Okay, listen. So free outdoor yoga classes Thursdays in September at 6 p.m. behind the rec center. Very cool. Flu shots Wednesday, September 23rd. There's still plenty of openings from 11 to 4. You can sign up online. Watch the Ridger and yes, in the Ridger, we're going to be having some more unique social distance and fall activities. So I'm going to leave you with that.
Thank you.
I have a quick one,
anyone-
Kurt.
Yeah, sure, Brett.
The Historical Commission would just like to wish a fond farewell to our Historical Commissioner, Eric Krogel, who's moved out of our city, needed a bigger house. There wasn't one available here, so he's moved on and has left the Historical Commission. So we will have some openings coming up into the end of the year or into next year. So if you have an interest at all in joining the Historical Commission, please get in touch with the City Hall, and I'd be happy to take your application on that. The other thing is we'll start to see some activities begin to slowly roll in. We're hoping to get started again on our Pleasant Ridge Then and Now work on the book. We might have to add an extra chapter for the last 6 months, which is very now, but and we might actually have the perspective of a teenager in town write their view of what Pleasant Ridge is like through this last 6 or 7 months. So that should be a really interesting chapter to read for everyone.
Very cool.
So more to come.
Excellent. Look forward to it. Amy, any election news?
Absentee ballot applications, if you get them, you can turn them in. You can use the Michigan website to see if you've already turned one in, because you could have chose to receive one back in March or in August for the November. That's updated every day. So as we receive applications, we're updating that information every day. We have 1,100 requests right now for absentee ballots.
Wow.
And we're welcoming any other requests. We don't have the ballots yet. The target is mid to late September. So once we get them, we're going to start doing some pre-processing this week where we get envelopes and everything ready to go so that when we get the ballots, it's just going to be stuff and mail. They need to be returned by 8 p.m. on election day, anytime up until that time. And the post office does deliver here on election day more than once. So we do get those ballots that are sitting at the post office. Other than that, if anybody has any questions on how to apply for an absentee ballot, or if you need to register, reach out to the clerk's office. You can do on the website, call City Hall, and we can get you registered. We can get you an absentee ballot.
And you will have the Dropbox at City Hall?
The Dropbox, yep, I'm sorry, the Dropbox is installed. We have a new Dropbox. It's kind of a larger silver box. It's right next to the door. It's not on the building anymore.
Nice.
It's a bigger capacity, so it'll hold a lot more. It's a double lock box, so it's a dual lock box, so it's a lot more difficult to get into. Our old box wasn't easy to get into, but this one is next to impossible to get into. So, and that Dropbox, it can be used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Excellent.
Amy, do you need any poll workers or other help for staffing election day?
So we always accept applications for poll workers. It's always nice to have a group of people to pull from. Some people don't want to work every election, and for a while I had the same staff working every election. Anybody is welcome to apply. If you're willing to travel out of Pleasant Ridge and work someplace else, I know other communities would be happy, but I'm happy to take your application. There is a training process that you go through that's done through Oakland County. With the pandemic, they have been doing all of that online, so it hasn't been any in-person training. I think they did do one in-person training, if I remember correctly, for August. But applications, I have them here, and they are on the State of Michigan website as well.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
Anybody, anything else? I'll just do my quick census now. I can't remember what the percentage was, but anyway, Pleasant Ridge is at 91% response rate, self-response for the census. We continue to be second in the state to Huntington Woods, which continues to have a couple-point lead on us. The Census Bureau is in the process of non-response follow-up so that anybody who didn't, and according to this, it could be as many as 100 homes if, based on the number of households in Pleasant Ridge, a lot of those a number of those would be vacant, but also some people who, for whatever reason, did not fill out. Somebody from the Census Bureau will be knocking on your door sometime in the month of September, while various ending dates and release dates are fought out in the courts, as the Trump administration has tried to push the Census Bureau to shorten the time frame. Now, the courts and a judge in California has put a stop on that. So it will continue for a while. But anyway, sometime this month, the Census Bureau will be trying to wrap up all their activities. So if you haven't filled out a questionnaire and you'd prefer not to have somebody knock on your door and ask you the questions through your screen, go call the Census Bureau. There are various ways to do it. You just go to census.gov and our 2020 census and get information. So Pleasant Ridge has done a great job, and we should be fine. I worry about a lot of the larger communities, especially poorer and communities of color, that are not responding very, very well, and that's an issue across the country. So, anything else? I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. May I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Night.